Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and we have just three of us right now, but a fourth will be joining us soon. We have Cannondale and TrainerRoad's Amber Pierce.
Good morning, everybody.
And back with us, it's exciting to have you. We have Pivot DT Swiss's Hannah Otto. What's up, Hannah?
Good to be here. Thanks.
You have lived a lifetime since you've been on here last. I feel like we were just saying it's only been a month and a half, but you have been racing literally all over the world.
Yeah, I've literally been around the world and back.
Yeah. So you did the Fayetteville Pro XCT, Whiskey Off-Road, which is a 50-mile, that's like an endurance mountain bike race or marathon mountain bike race that also has a fat tire crit, which check out our YouTube channel, by the way, if you're listening to this now, and you can see a race analysis that we did with Keegan, where we had his cameras on during the fat tire crit. And it's kind of wild to see the power that comes out of those tiny little ostrich legs of Keegan's. He's weighing like 145 pounds, and the numbers he's doing are weirdly high. He's just really, really strong. And I say weirdly high because he hasn't really been training hard, short power efforts at all this year because he's been getting ready for Unbound this weekend. Anyways, it's a cool race analysis. Check it out. And we have more coming. So go to our YouTube channel. If you're joining us right now on the live stream, give us a thumbs up. That way other people can find it. You also then went from there across the pond and you did the Albstadt World Cup in Germany, Nova Mesto World Cup. And both of those had short track and XCO. And then you also did Wisconsin Pro XCT. So you came back to the US and you did the short track and you did the XCO there. My goodness.
So much.
That is a lot. And then you have a note down here that you did a big training block 4 days after Sea Otter.
No, that should have said racing block. So I kind of count Sea Otter in this block because I raced Sea Otter and then I was home for 4 days. That's what that note means. I was home for 4 days and then I went to Fayetteville. And then after those 4 days, the longest I was home was 36 hours. So it's 36 hours at home between each of those: Fayetteville, Whiskey, Albstadt, Nova Mesto, Wisconsin.
Do you find that when you travel that much and you're like away from your routine, that you feel like the clock is kind of counting down until that erupts almost? So because of the way I'm saying this, a lot of us listen to this, like our routine is everything for us and it's how we train. It's got to be really tough to just constantly be on the road moving around, or have you prepared for that and are you ready for it?
A little bit of both. I feel like you have to change your routine. Hi, Nate.
Hello. Nate is here.
Nate has entered the chat.
Did you guys start extra early today?
No, we're good.
No, okay. And oops, I'm sorry.
You're only 3 minutes late. It's awesome. We're expecting more, so it's good to have.
We had a meltdown. You know, like kid meltdown, where then if you try to rush them more, they melt down more. Yes. And you want to just like pick them up and put them in the car.
Yeah.
But you got to slow down to go fast.
Good on you for taking the time.
I could have been a better dad.
Hey, haven't we all? We were actually just talking. We were just talking about Hannah's season and how, Nate, I'm going to recap this. So then Hannah, you can just jump right in. Since our last podcast, I think you did Sea Otter right before the podcast or right after, I can't remember. Then Fayetteville, Arkansas for Pro XCT, Whiskey Off-Road in Prescott, Arizona, Albstadt World Cup in Germany, Nova Mesto World Cup in the Czech Republic, Wisconsin Pro XCT back here in the United States. She's done all of those races. I know, right?
Last 6 weeks.
What?
Insane.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
We were just talking actually about like a lot of us routine. We have to have our routine in place in order to be able to train and in order to be able to feel like we can progress and do all that stuff. So my question was, do you feel like your routine is thrown off and it's detrimental to you and you can't wait to get back to training? Or is this something where you've learned to execute within this crazy travel and race schedule?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I feel like this is a time when my type A personality really shines through and has its brightest moments. Because I feel like if you get discombobulated during this sort of thing, it just all spirals. And so for me, I feel like I've been working my whole career in order to be able to hold a schedule like this. from two regards. One, from having the cumulative training load from years of training to be able to hold a racing block like this. And then also from the side of understanding the logistics of what a schedule like this takes and knowing how my routine will be disrupted and then being able to anticipate that and change accordingly. The hardest thing for me in this type of racing block is actually being really in the moment, mostly between the races, not so much during the races, because that's what you're aiming for, but it's really easy on Wednesday to just be thinking, okay, and then I race on Friday. And when it's so back to back to back, you can't really afford to do that because every day is so valuable and every training ride is so valuable, because in between races like this, you're getting maybe one, maybe two hard workouts in between. You're not doing a whole training block in between, during this racing block.
Yeah. I have a question. Do you ever get into a race and you start thinking about the next race and you actually ease up because you're like, I got to race really hard next week or in a few days from then? Does that happen, or can you give it all every single race?
I feel like I can give it all every single race. And I think one of the reasons for that is that all of these races hold such different importance to me, and they all build in different ways. So for example, Fayetteville and Wisconsin were really important to me because they gave me the points that I needed for Albstadt and Nove Mesto. And then Albstadt and Nove Mesto were World Cups. So they're pretty much the pinnacle anyways. And then Whiskey was just such a different alternate effort that in many ways that's like a large training day, very large training day anyways. So the mindset for me was different going into that one regardless.
See, this is something, Nate, you bring up a good point. I think a lot of us amateurs, we struggle with that, right? We don't stay in the moment and focused on the race. A lot of times we think of whatever's coming next instead of just staying in it.
I'll do it in the race where I'm like, I start off like I swam so much. Then during the swim, I'm like, I'm actually a biker and then a cyclist. And then during the bike, I'm like, you know what? I'm really a runner now. Just as soon as that happens. And I think, why am I doing this? Yeah, and then it happens. Amber, did you ever race more than a few days? I think I actually made it to day 2 of an 8-day stage race once. And that's about the most I've done. Maybe a 3-day.
I think the longest I ever did was a 12-day. But like Hannah, I was in a lot of situations where it was back to back to back. And sometimes that was back to back stage races. Sometimes it was back to back one-day races. Because oftentimes on the road, at least in the UCI calendar, they'll try to cluster races. So if there's a major stage race up in Belgium, they'll probably cluster a few one-day races in that region around that time because you want to make use of the time that all of the teams are there. So this is sounding very familiar. And I'm honestly very glad that I'm not managing this right now. I know how exciting it is and fun it is in the moment. But yeah, it's like a race to see who can recover the fastest between the events.
Do they ever, Amber, on your team? So like you're part of a team, right? And Hannah's racing solo each time.
Yeah.
So do you have days too where you're like, hey, I can kind of like, it's your job to recover. So the next day you can do more work for your team? Where Hannah's just like, boom, 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 all out every day.
Everything. Yeah.
Boom. That sounds so hard.
Right? Yeah.
Would you have that, Amber, though, where the team would strategically have people rest on, I mean, they do this right on Tour de France and stuff.
Yeah. So there would be days where there would be a climbing stage and it's not my job to win at the top of the mountain at the end. So I would basically climb the mountain as slow as possible to make time cuts so that I would conserve as much energy as possible to be able to help better the following day. And there were definitely times where I would ride a time trial as slowly as possible in order to, as slow as I can without missing time cut in order to preserve energy for the following day. But there are no easy days.
Yeah.
There just are no easy days. Yeah.
Right. I was like looking at
there is a huge difference between what Hannah's doing, where Hannah is racing for a result for herself every single time. So she is always racing for the win. Whereas in my case, in a lot of cases, I wasn't racing for the stage win for myself. I was racing for the stage win or for an overall for a teammate. And that's a really, really different job.
Mentally, physically, it's not like you didn't empty the tank, right? Like physically you were, your job
if
was
I did my job right,
right?
I will have emptied the tank. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Hannah, I want to run through the races that you had. There's so many of them. We could probably record one podcast episode on each one, but I want to go through this from a learnings perspective. I think a lot of us amateurs look at pros and we figure they've just got it figured out and they're just executing. But I want to dispel that myth and show that you're learning as you go, and that it's not like you're already proficient and you're just checking off boxes. So at Fayetteville, you were sick. And that was a huge bummer. So what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, that was a really hard experience for me because Fayetteville was a really important race in the US. There was 3 races there that race weekend. And I was a little bit sick going into the first one, but you want to put your best foot forward. Maybe you'll feel better when you get out there. So I went out, tried and race, got way sicker that night, and pretty much was just in bed. It was an in bed kind of sickness from there on out. And so there was just no way that I could race. And that was really difficult to accept. And I even ended up calling the doctor that has worked with USA Cycling to kind of talk through it with him, because it was one of those things where I just needed it to be out of my hands, because I felt like I was so frustrated with the situation that I could no longer make a good decision myself, even though I knew what it was deep down. It was just really difficult to accept, like I said. And so for me, I think a lesson in all of that was you can only do what you can do. And I think as athletes, one of my biggest fears is not reaching my full potential. And so for me, that means I'm always striving to do more. It means there always can be more. I'm always trying to turn over every rock. And sometimes it's just the end of the rope, and that's okay. And if your goal is to do everything you can, then you've done it. And so that was something that I had to accept. And while obviously I wasn't happy about that, I had to look at that and say, I did everything I can this race. It wasn't where I wanted to be, but if that's my goal, then that's it. That's all I can do. And so I basically just had to say, I did what I could. I'm not going to think about this anymore. I'm not going to let this impact me anymore. And also understanding in the kindest possible way that this does happen to everyone, not wishing it upon anyone, but understanding that everyone takes their turn. Everyone's card comes up at one point or another, whether it's injury, a conflict, illness. Everyone misses that important race at some time due to some unforeseen, unfortunate circumstance. And this was my turn. And it's really easy to let that cast a shadow over the experience, but it's how it goes. And so the best thing at that point that I could do was move forward and not let anything or anyone write any sort of story about what that means for me and my start of my season, because I truly was just getting started.
Yeah. Good advice. I like that. That applies to all of us, even though it's not our job to perform as a racer. I think a lot of people listening to this, they put a lot into whatever event they have, right? And they might have a similar experience. Yeah. Nate, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Have you ever taken the Enneagram test?
I have, yeah.
Are you an Enneagram 3?
Is that the achiever?
Yeah.
That's what I am. Yes. Very strongly so.
So what I heard of her saying that her fear was not living up to her, to like her potential and stuff. And so Enneagram is kind of like Myers-Briggs. It's a personality test. And I found it really valuable of learning about myself too. I'm an Enneagram 8, which is like the CEO. It's pretty crazy. Right?
Hey, weird.
And inside of Enneagram, you have different levels of like how they could like elevated you are, or how the growth of you individually. So that's very interesting that you say that that is your driver, achiever inside of that. It'd be fun to see later on what the other podcast hosts are.
Yeah, I've never taken that one. I've taken Myers-Briggs, but I've never taken that one.
What's
I
your
don't know if I can do
John?
it. Well, I can't remember actually. But I'm very predictable. That much I know. Like whatever I show who I am, right? And yes, it very much felt.
You're like, I'm so individual. I'm so unique, and then you read it, and you're like, well, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then there's one type. I forget the type, but it's like some people go, these things you can't put people in boxes, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, there's a type that says that, and they test and then they're that type.
Yeah, exactly. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Hannah, you're going to say something?
Oh, I love the Enneagram. I could go on and on and on, but it's awesome because it works on what your biggest fear is and what your biggest driving factor is. And so it's really cool for your interactions with other people because you can relate to people better when you understand what's driving them and what's scaring them, and then be a little bit kinder by not pressing those buttons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. It's good to have that with your partner or with anybody else that you work with really closely.
Exactly.
Okay. So great advice there. Whiskey, you like, that's after you were sick and then you have this big long race.
Yeah.
What'd you learn from that one?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because obviously I was just sick. I came home, I was home for 36 hours and then traveled to Whiskey. So that was a little bit tough because I'm recovering from illness on the road, and anyone who's ever done that, it can be really hard because you're waking up every day thinking, am I better? And it's really hard to know if you're better when you're analyzing it that deeply. So going into Whiskey, I knew I was well enough to race. I didn't know if I was truly better. And so my mindset had to leave from, am I better? Am I where I want to be? Am I achieving the plan that I had set for this race? And instead just being okay with where I'm at and being okay with what my body had to give on that day, and taking away every little win I could from that race personally. So how long can I stay with the group? Can I execute my nutrition well? Can I execute my hydration well? Historically, Whiskey's been a really hard race for me for a variety of reasons. But one of which is I've often struggled in the heat that time of year. And so making sure that I was really dialed on my hydration and taking the steps that I needed to make sure that it wasn't the same story as it's been in the past. You want to always move forward and learn different things. And then I think the final thing that I really learned that we've talked about here before is you race differently when you're not at 100%. And so I was racing in a way that allowed me a little bit of room for error. And it was really interesting to see where I could gain just that little extra 1 or 2% to help whatever my body was lacking. So in the Fat Tire Crit, a lot of the time that meant coming around the last corner into the steep climb first, so that I had a little bit of momentum and a little bit of a jump on everyone going into that climb. And in the backcountry race, it meant really emphasizing the use of momentum, even allowing small gaps to form sometimes, so that when everyone else was pedaling through bumps, I could be pumping them instead, and really looking at how those type of things can help you save energy and stay in the race even longer when you know that you're not at your absolute peak.
I just want to jump in here and say, first of all, I think this is such a brilliant approach. And this is such a good example of why it can be really valuable to race when you're not at 100%. Because all of those things that you're practicing and focusing on in that race are things that you can apply when you are feeling better and carrying that free speed and applying strategies that are energy saving. So when you are in a position where your energy levels are very low or constrained, either because you're in a heavy training block or you're recovering from illness, like you said, folks, if you're listening, this is how you do it. And it's a really great way to learn from those races when you know you're going in, without being anywhere near what you can do. And a lot of people get really discouraged when they're in that state and think, why should I bother racing if I know I'm not going to get a result? This is why. I mean, look how much you can learn and focus and practice, because your focus, it gives you an opportunity to focus on these very specific process goals that, Hannah, if you were feeling a lot better than you were, you would have been focusing on the race win and doing whatever it took to race that race for the win. But this was an opportunity to focus more deliberately on some of those more specific process goals. So cool.
Yeah. Well said.
This happens every time to me just because I'm just not that fit. So it's like built in.
The king of efficiency.
So yeah, exactly. But it is, if you race people faster than you, the same thing. You try every trick in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great learning grounds.
Okay. So Albstadt, that's a super hard course. It's just up and down. It's the World Cup. You can check it out on Red Bull TV. What did you learn at that one? You've traveled across to Europe. You've already had whiskey. I don't know if you're feeling better at this point, but what did you learn there?
Yeah, I was feeling much better at this point, which was really exciting to me because sometimes when you get sick, you almost forget what it feels like to feel great. So this was awesome to feel like myself again and to actually gain that confidence of, oh yeah, I definitely was not 100% because now this is what it feels like to be where I want to be. And this was my second time at Albstadt. It's a really puckery course. So meaning that it's really wide eyes. It's super high consequence. It's really scary. And I wouldn't say that about Nove Mesto, which is probably more technical, but Albstadt is just plain scary. It's really steep ramps with 90 plus degree turns with small drops in them, and they're wooden and they're wet. And so it's really high consequence because you can slide right off of them. But it's also really long, steep climbs, about 2-3 minute climbs in the race. And so that is what I was focusing on, was racing to my strengths. Is in the past with the World Cups, I've always really been focused on, not intentionally, the things that threw me off, the things where I felt like I was struggling. But in this race, I really emphasized the places on the course where I knew that I was my best, where I felt like I couldn't be beat on those sections of the course. And I just emphasized that every single lap. So in this race, because of UCI points, you're called up according to your UCI points. I was called up, I believe, 58th, which is 8th row, which is a huge disadvantage. It's
Not
very
ideal.
difficult. Yeah. And Albstadt's, it's renowned for being really difficult to pass because it becomes single track pretty quickly in the course, and it just bottlenecks and funnels and you're left standing and walking. And so I knew coming through the first lap that I was going to be in a less than ideal spot. And so I just really focused on racing in the moment. And I took that to the next level in this race. Usually it's race this lap like it's the last, but I was really just focused on the next person and on the next person in the way that I could pass them. So it wasn't, oh my gosh, I have to pass this next person right now. I have to do it right now. It was, okay, by that next corner, I'm going to be on that person's wheel. And then I would get there. Okay, by the next corner, I'm going to execute this pass. And it was just one step at a time. And it felt like probably the race that's gone by the fastest because I was so in the moment that all of a sudden we were finishing in the best possible way. And I finished 36th. So for me, that was a great result, being able to pass more than 30 people. And I attribute a lot of that to being very in the moment and not thinking about passing 30 people, but rather about thinking about passing the next one.
That's like hard for everyone. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead,
sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, and passing that many people on a course that's that scary. I mean, I'm not a mountain biker. I've done a little mountain biking. I will just say, even on a road course, it's hard to pass. I'm just imagining just trying to pass roadies that are strung out in a line on a road that, I mean, who are all racing at their maximum. That's not easy to do, let alone on such a technical and scary course. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
What you said about being in the moment, that's like hard for everybody to do. But the more you do it, it's like I think in the last like maybe 10, 20 years, it's become more of a thing of people being conscious about what they're doing at that time and not thinking ahead or letting the brain drift. Work, sports, fun. Have you ever done that where like you're having fun, you're doing something maybe with your kids, but you're thinking about something else in the future, and that thinking about it does nothing, no improvement in your life, right? All it does is take away from what you're doing right then. Where Hannah could have been thinking of the finish line instead of just like, what's the next challenge? Oh, there's a corner there. What do I do?
This is probably a big challenge for a lot of our listeners. We're big planners, right? And a lot of people that are listening to this are probably thinking, I know that I can execute this sort of IF for this sort of duration. You know, we build out these predefined outcomes. And in some cases, don't get me wrong, if you're doing like a time trial, it's really important to make sure that you aren't just, like racing in the moment, perhaps in that regard, where you're just like, I feel like doing 600 watts out of the gate, speaking from experience. But when you're talking about a race like this, you probably would have missed so many passing opportunities, right, Hannah? If you were thinking, well, if I surge right now, that might blow me up and I might not be able to do this. Or if you're just not focused on it, you're not going to see the opportunities to pass. My favorite races that I can think of that I have done absolutely are races where I was purely in the moment. And in most cases, those weren't races or they aren't necessarily races that I've won. They're races that I'm really proud of because the execution was great. And I was there and I didn't miss any opportunity in front of me. I took it when it was there and I made things happen. And that feels really good as a racer.
Does. I want to make one observation about another really smart thing that Hannah did. There's a very long list of smart things that she does, but I think it's so cool because the pros do this stuff, and this is the stuff that helps everybody. And so folks that are listening, even if you're not a professional, these are all things that you can do to help yourself on your own race day. But one of the things I love about what Hannah did was not only was she staying present, but she was setting little process goals for her in the race that were achievable. So like she said, she didn't say, I have to pass that person. Like, well, what does that even mean? Instead, break that down even further into a bite-sized chunk that is, I need to be on that person's wheel by that tree, by that corner, and putting herself in a position to do the thing that she needs to do instead of setting goals that probably would have been really discouraging, even though she would have been quote unquote in the present, setting a goal of like, oh, I should be 5 people ahead of where I am now and getting really down on herself. Breaking that down to like, okay, I want to pass that person. Well, what does that mean? Okay, I'm going to break that down even further into something that I know I can do that's going to build confidence and that's going to put me in a position to do the next thing. I think that is so, so cool. And that's something that we can all do, even on a training day if you're doing an interval.
Yeah. Well said, Amber. This is great. We have 2 more races to go through and we're going to answer an athlete's question with one of these. I bet we've already answered quite a few. Really good takeaways. Next one is Nove Mesto, and your note says, don't give up. After like the race that I'm hearing about at Alvstad, I'm wondering what in the world led to that being the takeaway at Nove Mesto.
Yeah. So Nove Mesto, going in from Alvstad, I was so thrilled with my ability to execute that race that I was really excited. Once again, called up somewhere in the 8th row, somewhere between, 56th and 60th. And I'm thinking about, okay, I know I have the ability to pass 30 people. This is going to be so exciting. I can't wait to pass all those people. And then the race started and I missed my pedal 3 times.
Oh man.
And everyone went by me and I went through the start finish line on the start lap in 71st. And that was so painful because now in your mind, I don't have to pass 30 people. I have to pass, more. I have to pass 40, 45 in order to achieve the result that I want to. And it was also a different style, of course. Nove Mesto is a little bit punchier. The climbs are 45 seconds maybe. And so everyone starts incredibly hard in that race and carries it longer because they're punching and then resting and then punching and then resting. And so it's a lot harder than a 3-minute climb to be able to kind of motor along and catch that wheel and then pass that wheel. And so I just felt like I was on the rivet for the first few laps, desperately trying to catch every person that I could. And I was making some progress. I moved up a little, but it just wasn't the same as it was in Almstadt. And I felt myself getting to that point of frustration. And I felt like right before I crossed over it, I just thought, no, I'm not going there. I've been there before. I know that frustration in races does not serve me. So I refuse to be frustrated. I'm just going to do what I can. And I feel like staying in that and not giving up and not allowing myself to get frustrated is what saved my race, because I passed a couple people in the first 3 or 4 laps, a handful, and I was in 71st. So we're talking about in maybe the low 60s. I passed probably 20 people in the last 2 laps when everyone else was pulling the chute. And so for me, that was a really good learning experience of not every race is going to go the same. You're not going to chug along and pass people consistently the same every lap in every race. Every course is going to come out differently. And in this one, people exploded at the end. And if I had allowed myself to get frustrated, if I had allowed myself to say, I'm not where I want to be, and then already written it off, because I don't know about other people, but sometimes you start to write the story of the race while you're racing. This was a bad day for me. This was not the day that I wanted.
Oh, so true.
This, you know, you already have your reason in your mind, right? You know what you're going to say when you cross the finish line. Well, I missed my pedal and then I was so far back and I couldn't make passes. You already have the story written. What if you write it differently in the race? And so that's what I try and do. When I feel myself writing that story, I was too far back at the start and I couldn't make it up. But then I passed everyone the last 2 laps. Oh, what if that happened? What if I could do that? Well, that's really exciting. Well, I would be proud of that. And all of a sudden I have this new motivation. And so for me, that was the lesson there, was simply put, never give up, but to rewrite that story that you would be proud of during the race.
The hero's journey in all books, there's always a down before the up. There's never just up, right? That's what makes life interesting and stories interesting.
Yeah, great point, Nate. Can I go to Wisconsin? Because then you come back to the United States and you have, and I'm going to read Matt's question because I think we should just address it right here with your example of this. Mm-hmm. So, or Matthew, forgive me, Matthew. Matthew says, I'll be entering a few crits as a first-time racer. I'm fortunate enough to participate in the Intelligentsia Cup this year. It's been said by the TR team and folks, and I know that he says, I know that the novice categories are dangerous and quote, get out of Cat 5 fast. I don't know if get out of Cat 5 fast is actually the best advice. So apart from traditional wisdom of be comfortable riding in a group and or pace line, riding smoothly and holding a line, etc. And he says, no, I have watched the TrainerRoad race analysis videos and NorCal cycling. Hopefully you've watched the TrainerRoad one that we just did with Keegan, like I just said. In the live chat, somebody mentioned that Keegan hit over 21 watts per kilogram and burst into flames on the video. And yes, it's like NVA Jam. He went on fire and the field disappeared. So, but go check that out. So it says, bottom line, what is the safest way to upgrade from novice to Cat 4? We can cover that. But this is where it applies to your question. How does strategy change when we race to finish versus racing to win? And is there a difference at all? And if there is, how does that relationship change as we move up through the categories? So we'll address the categories and everything else later, but I want to address his question with your experience, because racing at Wisconsin, you went from, I am going to make the best with my bad start position, and I am going to try to get as high up as I can, to suddenly now you're at Wisconsin and you actually have the chance to win. Mm-hmm. So was that more pressure, or how did your strategy change when suddenly you had that chance to win?
Yeah, I'm just so thrilled that this is how this whole racing block turned out because of what it taught me. So I actually wasn't necessarily planning on going to Wisconsin, but after my experiences in Europe, I thought, I need more points. I want to give myself the opportunity to start higher up in the grid. So I want to go somewhere and get some points. And so I made this hard decision to go to Wisconsin after getting back from Europe. So I literally flew back from Europe on Tuesday, got home from Europe Tuesday at noon, and then I took a red eye on Wednesday to Wisconsin. Ooh. So even going there, I thought, gosh, I don't know how my body's going to respond to this, feeling jet lagged, all of the above. But as I prepared for the race, I realized that it was such an important step for me because of the mindset shift. Going from Albstadt, where I had to just race my own race, focus on catching one, like Amber said, making those process goals throughout, trying to catch one person at a time and moving up. All of a sudden, I realized this is almost a different sport. This is a whole different mindset going to Wisconsin, because looking at the start list, I knew that I could win. And so I needed to execute a race from the winning mindset, which is totally different. And so for me, it's actually making a more aggressive race plan, because I know that the race is likely going to be within my control. So in Albstadt, there's 1,000,001 things that could change how my race goes. Missing a pedal, that changed my whole race plan in the first 3 seconds of the race. But in Wisconsin, knowing that I was going to be lining up on the front line, knowing that I had the chance to win, there were a lot less variables involved. And so it was up to me to execute. So for this race in particular, it was a pretty flat race. There was a lot of corners and there was really no climb more than 20 seconds. And by climb, I mean 5% gradient. So there weren't a lot of places to get away. And so I knew it was going to be very much a drafting race. And so my strategy was to put in a very, very hard first lap, even if it forced me to burn some matches, because I wanted the group to only be me and one other person. So it was just the two of us to start with. My goal was then to have the other person go around, but I knew this other racer and I knew that she was likely not going to at any point go around. And so while I tried to push her around, while we even had a conversation out on the course about, hey, it's your turn to pole, it was clearly not being taken to heart. And so at that point, I executed my backup plan, which was
shake and bake.
Yeah, pretty much. I decided that if she wasn't going to pull through, there wasn't a lot else I could do about that, because I wasn't interested in sitting up and having it be a group, which meant that I had one other option, which was to continue to pull. So that meant that I was going to go about 90%, so that if at any point she did come around, I still had 10% to give to get on her wheel. And also I was going to use the corners to my advantage so that she continually had to close gaps, so that even though she was sitting on my wheel getting my draft, she was still having to burn matches in order to respond to the momentum I was using around corners. And
so
then
can I ask really quick, Hannah, on the corners part, like, were you easing up coming in, then accelerating coming out? Were you taking lines that forced them to, riding blind, having to take bad lines and then causing them to be able to, come off the back and having to accelerate? What were you doing in the corners specifically?
Mm-hmm. I was putting in about 3 hard pedal strokes into the corner and 3 hard pedal strokes out of the corner. And I found that was causing enough of a yo-yo effect, because she didn't know when I was going to do that. It's not like I was doing it every single corner. And so especially any corners that had a slight descent before them, usually you might coast into it and then turn. If I just put in a couple hard efforts on that descent, I would carry so much speed into the corner that it was really difficult to match before coming out of it and having to stand and accelerate.
Smart move. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then my final plan was, I knew that there was one riser that was about 20 seconds long, about 3 minutes out from the finish. And I knew that was pretty much it for me. So I was all in for that riser, and it was just a don't look back situation. So I attacked it with everything I had. And when I came, it was almost a U-turn at the top. When I took that corner and I could see that I had a gap, I knew that I had executed well. And for me, the win was very exciting, but what was more exciting to me was executing a race plan from start to finish, because I feel like in mountain biking, I don't know about other disciplines, but in my experience in mountain biking, it's so difficult to do because there's so many elements and so many things that change and get in the way out there, that it's pretty rare that you get to do every single thing that you write down or talk about doing beforehand. And so it was really exciting to me to be able to check each box and say, this is what I planned and this is what I did.
Nice. Way to go. Good stuff. What's next for you for your next races? Because podcast listeners always ask that. They want to know where they can meet Hannah or any of the pros that we have on here.
Yeah. So next I'll do the Missoula UCI C1 in Montana, and then I'll do the Canada Cup C1 in Canmore, Calgary, Canada. And that'll be my next one. And then I have a block that's actually bigger than this first one after that.
Crusher in the Tusher, Nationals in Colorado, Mont Saint Anne World Cup, Snowshoe World Cup, Leadville, and hopefully World Championships. Holy cow.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
That is a big block.
Yeah.
You're not doing Unbound. That's one thing that I want to first say. Good luck to all listeners who are racing Unbound. I'm going to click on the link that I embedded with weather because I want to see what it's unfolding. That's like the big story this year and to see where it's at. And it looks like, 74% chance of thunderstorms and 14-mile-an-hour winds and 74 degrees. So
John,
it doesn't look like, sorry.
Who do you think will win Unbound in the men's category? I bet you have a prediction.
Yeah, I do. It's predictable. Get ready to drink. I do think Keegan's going to win. I think Finsty is going to be really close. And I know that this sounds super weird because people are going to say, because there's so many good riders with like world tour, big day experience, right? You have like Ian Boswell, Stetna, you have, Ted King may or may not race, perhaps a preemptive congrats to the Kings with a little one coming any day now. Mm-hmm. So, I know that you have a lot of people with a lot of depth, but knowing what Keegan's been doing for training, he's preparing for a totally different race that I'm not sure people are ready to be able to race. So it's like, it's just like, like Rocky Balboa, when he goes out and like, does like some hardcore training and, with his trainer and everything else, like it's kind of like that. And Fincy's been right there with him step by step. And I think that they're going to race it differently than what people are used to. We'll see. It might get the best of them, but they might do really well. And if they do really well, it's going to actually, I think, reframe how people race gravel. And I bet there's going to be like articles written and they're going to get upset about it. And people are going to say,
this is big. I just thought you were going to say Keegan. Like,
no,
you're building it up. He's going to change the world of cycling.
Not changing gravel.
Nothing will be the same. Nothing will be the same.
They'll change gravel.
Documentaries.
No. I'm saying
Keegan's going to be like, and I took that personally. Anyone won Unbound Gravel.
Okay, let's calm down here. I'm saying there will probably be articles written by racers that are upset about like the fact that the spirit of gravel is no longer being respected in the exact way that they want it to be respected, as articles have been written already about that in previous years. I would expect that. But
I don't know what this means. I think if it's a super wet and sloppy course, the mountain bikers will have an advantage because there'll be all of these, like World Tour people can do it, but there'll be all these like little things where they'll put in a little less watts. They'll be a little more efficient. They'll be a little more relaxed over hours and hours and hours and hours for the whole race. And that's going to stack up. Hannah, what do you think? Mountain bikers on sloppy gravel versus World Tour?
Definitely from the skill standpoint, I think that, like you said, it's about the efficiency and the lack of fear surrounding it. So carrying momentum through the mud on all of those little ups and downs rather than being nervous and tapping the brakes over and over. But the one thing I will say for this course when it gets muddy is it's not just slippery, sloppy mud that you're navigating. It is peanut butter mud and it is mechanical city. It is broken derailleur hangers. It is just absolute pandemonium for bikes. So I'm excited to see what turns out because I think in these circumstances, it could be anyone's game because the top people, it doesn't matter who you are. You can have a mechanical that isn't always within your control. And so I think that someone who just perseveres, this could be a tortoise in the hare situation. If the hare gets a mechanical, someone could just kind of slowly make their way across the finish line. We'll see. I don't know.
Just walk.
I mean, seriously.
Might be faster. If you think about it, like muddy conditions probably raise mechanicals by X%, right? Like you can figure out like what it raises. So in one respect, it's about just dodging all of those things and making the right decisions just time after time, racing in the moment, like you talked about. It's simple things too. It's when you go through the mud and you go through the water and you do with all this sort of stuff that they're going to have to do. How much power are you actually putting into your drivetrain when you're shifting, when you're doing that and everything's clogged up with mud? Because if you're putting in too much and you do that, that's when things start to go sideways with chains dropping, bending, braking, pulley wheels breaking, all that stuff. I'd personally rather have if I was like a SRAM athlete and I had a non XX1 derailleur or whichever ones, SRAM has that new, like if you bump the derailleur or hit the derailleur, it can disengage instead of tear off. And I bet that could be helpful if they find themselves like bumping into deep ruts or anything like that, not bending a derailleur hanger. But it's just like, granted, it is anyone's game. I'm eager to see it. I think Sophia on the women's side, I know this is big shock. Like you'd expect this coming from these athletes, but she's also changed substantially the way she is training. And she's like,
she won Cape Epic. I mean,
right.
You're pretty good if you do that.
Yeah. And she's, the other thing with it too is, I think a lot of athletes haven't specifically, they've kind of been, and it's understandable, been afraid to target Unbound almost because it seems like such an outlier. And Sophia, like her perspective from the beginning is like, nope, I'm taking this thing like head on. Like I am preparing for it and I'm going for it. I'm really curious, but there's so many strong athletes and anything could happen, you know? So
it would make my day to have Sophia and Keegan like double win, like partners cool, too. Huh? It's so cool.
I think the only thing that would make me happier is if Ryan Standish won. He did awesome. Yeah, Gravel Locos. He did fantastic. Which mountain bike race did he just win? The Grand Junction. He won that. He's riding really well. I want to mention something. Ryan's a fantastic human. Everyone should go follow him, but he's doing a fundraiser for Bike MS, which hits really close to home for him as his father battles MS. And Ryan does a lot of great things for that. And he's partnering with Hand Up Gloves right now. Go to his Instagram, check it out. They're selling some cheetah gloves and he did the most amazing photo shoot I've ever seen. And anyways, they're doing some gloves that actually go and benefit Bike MS. It's really cool. So that would be like, if you're asking me dream of dreams, if Ryan wins, I'm as happy as it gets. So
there's one other thing we should say, as Hannah said about the mountain bikers having the sphere and some of those spots with speed. And I want to just say this point of they are professionals, and Amber, as a professional, you had an experience where you can cross those like little water it's blind inside. Water crossings is blind inside. Amber, obviously a very good cyclist. And can you just share that story? Because I don't want amateurs to be like, I have to send it for like every one of these things. And there's going to be water crossings this time for sure.
Yeah, typically on a water crossing, you want to follow the people in front of you, because if one person takes a line and they get across safely, then you know that that's a good line to take. I ended up in no man's land briefly and took the send it mentality, and I hit a rock that was under the water and I had a really, really bad crash. It was actually the first severe concussion of my career. So I would just, and again, it is a really, really long race. Like the time that I would have saved, being a little bit more meticulous about that water crossing, it wasn't worth it. It absolutely wasn't worth the risk that day. And so what would have been a lot faster would have been to not crash. That would have been the fastest thing.
Good point.
Well, you couldn't finish. So, didn't you ride for 30 more miles?
I rode for 100 more miles.
Oh my God.
I crashed 30 miles in and I rode for 100 more miles, and it was not the right thing to do. I think I was in the middle of nowhere and I was doing the typical athlete override. I didn't have the resources there to like assess for concussion, and I was probably a little bit in shock. What actually caused me to stop was in the course of that crash, I actually hit my knee and I was pushing through pain in my knee. And 100 miles later, I was like, I would really like to have a functioning knee for the rest of my life, and that's more important to me than finishing this race. So that was actually what caused me to stop. And then of course the concussion symptoms set in a couple days later. And that was really when, so it wasn't immediate. But it was really tough. So in hindsight, the better thing to do would have been to, be a little bit more careful about that water crossing, take the long view of that race. I mean, you can lose 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you can lose an hour in that race and make it up, depending on, because you don't know what's going on for the folks ahead of you. Mm-hmm. And as Hannah mentioned, tortoise in the hare, I mean, there's just so much that can change over the course of that race because it is so long that it's really
especially with amateurs, right, Amber?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's time. You see even more huge fluctuations and variations when you're not chasing some sort of organized group.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that almost all the amateurs, like 99.9%, aren't racing for a placement. They want to finish or a time. And think about how much work you put into this race. And I bet you slowing down on the water crossings might cost you 2 to 3 minutes over the whole thing, right? And you're going 10 hours. Like, just be safe, everybody. Like, you don't need to send it through there yeah. And you could hurt other people too. And you're going to be alone. Everyone's alone. No one, I think, is with someone else, the whole DK, or I'm sorry, Unbound Gravel, besides like the top pros.
Yeah. Well, you usually find smaller groups or individuals that you can ride with, and that helps a lot. Make friends out on the course. It's pretty fun.
But you have to find them.
Yeah. But
there's never like a
string
to string. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you do have to find them, and usually you're with them for a little ways, and then you separate. Maybe you find them again. It's kind of fun. But I would take the long view. Err on the side of safety, for sure.
I just wanted to jump on something Nate said there, which is a lot of amateurs are racing for time. If it's rainy and it's muddy, be kind to yourself. You probably won't achieve your time, and that doesn't mean you had a bad race. It means the conditions were really gnarly. Don't be afraid to change your goals according to the conditions while you're out there. There's no shame in that. It's being smart.
Yeah. The pros times are going to be altered by the same conditions too. It's not just you, it's everybody.
We're finally going to have coverage of this race, which will be great, video coverage, which will be awesome to see. I think Flow Bikes will have it, but the Lifetime Grand Prix is televising things. I could be wrong on this one, but I'm pretty darn sure, and I would hope that they televise this one if they televise Sea Otter as well. So that's going to be really exciting. I can't wait. Noah Sears in the chat mentions that there's probably some Dutch guy is going to win in the men's race. And I think that there have been some riders from the Netherlands that have been racing some of like the gravel races in the Midwest recently, getting ready for Unbound and just destroying things. So yeah, who knows, right? Some really strong athletes, just like in Cape Epic. To use Noah's words, how he says some Dutch guys, some German guys showed up and absolutely destroyed Cape Epic this year. So, same thing could happen. It's going to be interesting to see. Good luck to Alex Wild, also friend of the podcast, who's racing. Yeah. Exciting to see how that goes. Alex. And then one other good luck thing. Good luck to Richie Rude, friend of the podcast, TrainerRoad user. He's got the EWS. The first round of EWS is coming up this weekend. Super excited for that. Richie, everyone should go follow him. He's the kindest human in the world, who also is the most violent human on a bike I've ever seen. And then Coach Chad, our own Coach Chad, we have to give out congrats. He's not here with us this week. He won't be here next week because he's got much more important things to do. He's getting married to his sweetheart, to Amarette. So congrats, Chad. Super exciting. Everybody, you can go find him on Instagram. He's never on there. So if you send him a message, he probably won't see it, but we should all do it anyway. TR Coach Chad TR or TR Coach Chad. I can't remember which it is. So you can go find him there. Jane, let's get into your question. You say, hey, host, I've been cycling for a year now, but have recently taken the plunge into structured training after getting a new road bike that came with a power meter. I found your podcast a few months ago going through a Spotify search. So fellow listeners, grant Jonathan his wishes by rating the podcast 5 stars so more women like me can find the podcast. Yes, go to Spotify. Last I checked, we were within 100 ratings of being the top. There are way more than 100 people that are listening to this right now, and there will be many times more that are going to listen to it afterwards. So go to Spotify, please rate. We have to be number 1. We're number 1 on iTunes. We need to be number 1 on Spotify as well. So, and we're talking about cycling podcasts here. So go rate. Okay. Jane says, as I mentioned, I'm new to structured training, but I seem to be incapable of respecting my recovery weeks. You're not alone, Jane. Judging by internet memes and talking to my friends, I am not alone in knowing what I should do, which is go easy, but ignoring that and going too hard. Our ladies group ride happens every Wednesday. I have the option of a race ride every week. Racing is always happening in my area, and I'm finally strong enough to be within striking distance of QOMs in my neighborhood. All of this adds up to way too much fun to say no to, but I'm worried I could be building bad habits that could stop me from improving. This is especially important to me since I've just committed to racing SBT gravel with a friend next year. So that'll be 2023. And I'll need to get a lot faster to stick with her. So I'm concerned if I don't address this super fun, but not very diligent way of living, it'll bite me down the road. What do you all do to say no to all of these temptations during recovery weeks? Signed, Recoveryless in Seattle. That's very well penned, by the way, Jane. I like that. Okay, Hannah, do you want to kick us off? And then Amber, any tips that you have, and we can go into this and talk about what we all do individually.
Yeah, well, first off, I think that recovery weeks are the outlier. They're not the usual. So if you're able to fit some of these things into your normal structured training plan, then if all you're doing is missing them on the recovery week, then I think a lot of the time just a see you next week is pretty simple. I also know as an athlete, it can be really hard to say that you're recovering. I don't know why, but when people say, oh, did you have a hard day today? And it was a recovery day, I'm always like, oh no, I don't really want to finish the sentence. So if you don't want to admit to people that you're recovering for whatever reason, you don't have to use that as the excuse. A lot of the time on my recovery week, I will do other things that are recovery focused that still fill my time so that I have actual things filling my time that allow me to easily say no. So, I mean, it could be something like a doctor's appointment, even that you've put off. Oh, sorry, I can't come because I have this doctor's appointment. It's actually because you have a recovery week, but you did schedule a doctor's appointment. So it's the truth. That might be really out there, but based on this question, I'm getting the vibe that it's just really hard for you to actually say no. And then the last thing I would say is just pick one. If you have all of these opportunities and it feels like you absolutely just cannot miss them and it's so hard during your recovery week, temper your expectations and just pick one thing to feed that itch and then skip everything else, because that one thing probably won't derail the entire week. But all of them would. So if you need to scratch that itch, one works. More than one, you are derailing and causing a long-term problem.
I like that. Good guidelines. Amber, what's it you?
What?
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do during a recovery ride is bakery rides with friends. And it sounds like a big draw for you is not only the racing, but the social connection. So integrating some social connection into your recovery weeks can be really fun. Maybe somebody has a recovery day during that week. Most folks have at least one if they're doing structured training. Connect with a friend when it's their recovery day and plan a bakery ride. You just go to a bakery and go home. It's a really fun way to ride. The other thing you can do is, even if your friends are going out for a training ride, maybe that group ride, meet up with them after the ride. Maybe they like to ride to a bakery or cafe after the ride's over. Ride there, meet them, hang out, ride home. You can do the same thing if somebody's going out for their training ride. Maybe you both do like a warm-up spin to a cafe, have a coffee together. They keep going on their training ride. You go home. So it can be really helpful to have other people involved in, because it makes it more fun and it helps you be accountable. So if your friends know that it's your recovery week and you would like to ride with them on that recovery week, they can help you be accountable and support you in that and say, we're going to, you might be like, okay, I really want to go do the group ride today. And I know that you're riding there from this cafe. Maybe I should do it today. And then your friend can be the one that talks you down from that ledge and says, nope, go home, do your recovery. So, yeah, I would solicit some extra support from your friends and integrate some social connection into the recovery aspects of your plan.
Nate, you got something to say?
Yes. Based on what Hannah just said, this is a crazy, no, this could work. Scratching that itch, right? Like, so you do have to scratch that itch sometimes, and it's better to scratch it or else things get worse later. It's just kind of like if you get a craving for food, if I try to fight that too much, it just gets worse and worse and worse until it consumes my life.
And suddenly you're you have your hand in a bag of cheese in the fridge and you're eating cookie dough at the same time. And
yeah. 2 Uber Eats of Popeyes coming back to back because you want to keep it hot. So you keep a 20-minute.
And all you wanted was one cookie. It spiraled into this.
I know. But what if on midweek of your recovery week, let's say you do a good amount of volume, but you go for 1 QOM, right? And you just say, hey, I'm just going to target, and it's going to be low volume. It's almost like a taper. So I say, I'm going to do 1 6-minute effort on Wednesday. So the part leading up to it, I'm going to rest to really nail that 6-minute effort. And I'm going to, ride easy before, do that, then go home, and then recover after that, where you get the motivation and you're kind of looking forward to really getting that QOM. And she's close, right? That's what she said. Mm-hmm. You get to kind of measure yourself, but also the amount of stress on your body won't be so much that, if you're doing really long rides, hour, 2-hour rides after that, you can still recover from that. This doesn't work if your climbs are like an hour, or there's like a 2-hour segment, or like a 3-hour segment. But there's a minute segment, or two 1-minute segments or something that could be great to scratch an itch, and it gives you like a little motivation to do it, and then you can recover the rest of the week and come back to training.
Yeah, it's tough to, and as long as it's an itch that's scratched and it's not something that drifts into becoming something more, right? Because because speaking from experience, if you get 1 KOM, then you're like, what if I had 2?
What's that like?
Well, I'll relate it to cookies. If I have 1 cookie, I'm like, man, what's another one, right? In the same sense.
That. Thank you.
So yeah,
I understand now, John. Thank you.
Popeye's wings. No. But so the way that I manage this, because boy, it's really hard for me, and it always has been. But the way that I recognize it is I recognize all of that, like the desire to do a lot during the recovery weeks. I recognize that as energy. And right now that energy is being channeled into one spot, and I can channel it into another spot. One thing that's really helped me over the past few years is taking all that energy that I have and channeling it into recovering as well as I can. So that might look like that day you passionately approach laying on the couch. You passionately approach like, oh, I'm going to really eat healthy, good, like food that I love, that makes me feel great. I am going to do everything that I can so that I can set myself up for a great night of sleep. Like, and I know it doesn't sound as exciting as going and getting a QOM, but in my case, at least, it's been possible to redirect that energy into that. And then as a result, I recover better during that week. This is just going to set you up for further success later on. So there's like a ton of different options that you have here from all of us that you've gotten, and you have to find what works for you. But there's a principle that needs to be understood here, is that, remember this, when you're training, you aren't getting faster. It's as your body adapts to training, that's when you get faster. So the best athletes respect their recovery with equal importance to the work that they do, because they know that it's an equally weighted equation. You need to have one to be able to have the other in order for everything to be productive. So think of it that way. Recovery weeks should be respected. Like, make sure that you go through and give your body the best chance it can to adapt and change and absorb all that awesome quality work that you've been doing. It turns into speed. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? Cool. We want to be pretty quick this week too, because Amber's got mom life to take care of too, in addition to work life. So Dan's question: thank you, TrainerRoad team, for the comprehensive, effective, science-based podcast and product. When I have been able to stay on a plan, TrainerRoad has significantly improved my cycling and overall fitness. And this is where my question comes in. Like many of us, I have many life opportunities and demands, including family, religious service, career, and long-term mental health challenges. I find that I can stay on plan for a few weeks, but when other life demands increase, my total TSS, they say in quotes, and I assume what they're talking about is just the life stress that comes in. So not training stress, but also just the life stress, makes it difficult to maintain workout consistency without drawing my well too far down. And drawing your well too far down just meaning that things become overwhelming and impossible, right? Of course, every situation is different, but I'm interested to hear your team's experiences with and an approach to adapting their training and training plans to non-exercise sources of TSS. Thanks again, and keep up the important and impactful work. Nate, can we go to you first on this one, and then we can go to Hannah after that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is every single age grouper's issue, unless they're like even a young single person or their parents pay for everything. Like, other than that, you have responsibilities, and everyone does, and they get more as you get older. And then there's one day where you don't, where you get to retire and your kids are gone, and maybe you can then train a lot. But this is everyone's issue. And one thing I think really helps on this is to start lower and be consistent. So instead of starting mid volume and hitting those, and then life comes in, as you get more of that training stress, life stress is also harder. And then you sleep bad one night, and then everything falls apart, and like you don't recover. You might struggle with a workout. It's way better to do it in reverse. So start with less and then go up. Another thing is, if you can just do something instead of nothing, and I've fallen in this trap too. You have a 2-hour workout on your calendar, you're not feeling it, or you don't have enough time, so you skip it, when you could use the workout alternatives feature and be like, I'm going to go 30 minutes, 45 minutes, right? And so in that really hard week, instead of doing your really high TSS, you're doing like 3 or 4 bangers that are really quick. And don't get caught in the trap of TSS, because that doesn't always equate directly with fitness. And that week of like, it's going to be higher intensity and stuff, it might actually help you, right? It could, depending if you're really tired. The lower stress is like a little mini recovery. You might get super compensation. It might motivate you more, because if you're doing 2-hour workouts or 90-minute workouts and you go to a 30-minute workout, it flies by, right? Yeah. And afterwards you're like, bam, and I did something, and I'm like high on endorphins, and the amount of food that you eat too, you can recover glycogen way easier. You can kind of get back to set, and then your cortisol levels lower, you're sleeping better, and you can then be more consistent, whatever your normal plan is. And the chasing of TSS, I mean, have you all ever done this where you would like, this time I'm going to do this per week, right? Average for the 4 weeks. And yes. I've never done it like for like more than like a month or two. Cause it's so easy to bite off more than you can chew. So easy. And it is easy though to switch to a lower volume plan or do that. Yeah. And be okay with it, right?
Progress. Yeah.
It could be better, not even make progress. It could be optimal for you. That's the thing that people don't get is, it's like our high volume plans are brutal and they're not optimal for most people. Say brutal relative, right? Because if you don't train very much, they are brutal. But if you have a whole bunch of, like for Amber, as she's coming off a pro, they probably wouldn't be brutal, or for Hannah. But for me, I did get through them, but it took many years to get there. I had to step up and go through it.
Yeah. Well said, Nate. Hannah, what tips did you have for Dan in this case of, trying to, when life gets in the way, I guess?
Yeah, this is a really hard one because life TSS is pretty unquantifiable. I'm convinced that if someone was able to quantify the stress that we got from day-to-day activity, they would be a very rich person. A lot of people have tried, but that is something that is like, it would be amazing to actually know the kind of stress that's coming from all different elements. So first of all, don't stress about stressing. That's number one. And as someone who's high stress, I can say that. The other thing is just taper your expectations. Understand that this is impacting you and that is okay. The next thing I would say is plan for the future. So plan your training around your life. Don't try and plan your life around your training, because you can't. Then you will fall short, and then you will feel sad, and then you will be stressed, and it will spiral. Just look at your life and look at the gaps that you have and do the best with what you have. So that could be, a daily thing that you're having to assess. But if you can plan for the future, that's even better. I know a lot of people will find a training plan and think that this is the way the plan is set up, so this is how I have to do it. But if your Mondays are absolutely insane, make that your off day. You can switch things around. And I'm sure maybe Jonathan can explain the way that you can do that in TrainerRoad's platform, but I'm sure like you can switch workouts around according to your life. If Monday, Wednesday, Friday are really busy, make Tuesday, Thursday your focus rides, and you can change that on the weekly. So constantly look ahead and understand that it's okay to move workouts according to where your life is busiest.
Great advice. Amber.
I'm going to probably echo a little bit of what both of you said, but I think it's really important to take a long view of this and remember that one off day or 1 week, it's not going to derail your training. So we say this a lot, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. When I first started racing professionally, I was definitely in the letting perfect be the enemy of the good camp. And I really felt like if one workout didn't go well, or even one, it was to the point where if one interval set didn't go well, it was like, oh, well, that whole workout was garbage. This whole day is garbage. And then it would make me feel like I had to start all over again with a clean slate in order to have the perfect training ride, to make the perfect training week, to have the perfect season. And as I gained experience and learned, nothing is ever going to be perfect. No one shows up to the start line at 100%. We do the best we can with what we have on the day, period. And if you're doing that, then you're winning. So don't feel like if all of your ducks are in a row and one falls down, that everything is over. It's all done. No, if a training ride goes off the rails, just get back on the horse the next day. Or if a week goes off the rails, it's okay. You can get back to it the next week. It's just, there are so many things in life that we can't control, that are beyond our control. Those are the things that you don't want to stress about. You adapt to them, you pivot, you adjust as you need to. And then when you can and you're ready and your stress levels allow you to, you get back to training. So keep in mind that if you're taking that long view, what's the season? What is your overall goal? Just being fit and feeling good in your body for life. I mean, those are the more important things. And keep in mind that one day, one workout, 1 week, even a month isn't going to be the end of everything that you're working towards. I want to echo what Hannah said in terms of planning for times of extra stress. Dial back the volume if you need to. Like she said, you can switch around your days if you need to. With TrainerRoad, you can do this with Plan Builder. You can change the days that your training is scheduled. You can also use workout alternates if you need to dial back the volume on a certain day. So instead of a 90-minute workout, you do a 30-minute workout. And then plan for time off if you need to. Adaptive training will do this for you. You can put in on your calendar, if you know you're going to need a week where training is just not going to fit into your life that week, put it in your calendar. Adaptive training will adapt your plan for you. If you have to skip consistently, though, if you're missing 1 or 2 workouts every week, if you started a training plan and you were only able to complete 3 weeks and the next 3 weeks were disrupted and you weren't able to complete the whole plan for the next 3 weeks, it might be time to reevaluate that plan. And like Nate said, maybe be on a lower volume plan. And maybe that's the thing that you can do consistently. So another take home from this is the best plan for you is the one that you will do. So what's the plan that fits in your life? What's the plan that's going to feel motivating and energizing? Because just because it fits into your life doesn't mean it's going to give you the stress and recovery balance that you need to feel energized and motivated to train. What's the plan that's going to give you consistent wins? If you feel like you're constantly missing out on 1 or 2 workouts and it's really starting to affect your confidence and your motivation, dialing back so that you're ticking those boxes and you're able to get 90 or 100% plan compliance. Like that's the kind of thing that's going to be really great for your motivation. And then integrating social outlets here, if that could be something that helps keep you engaged with your plan. And then lastly, I would just say mindset. Even if you have to adjust your training to be lower volume, even if it's only a 30-minute workout, instead of viewing that as a chore that you're trying to fit in with everything else, even if it's just a 30-minute block, can you adjust your mindset and have that be more looking at that 30 minutes as, wow, this is 30 minutes that I get for myself to do something that's going to be really energizing and help me decompress from everything else that's going on in my life. And that little mindset shift can be huge for how much your training is actually stressing you and how your training might help balance out some of the stress that you're experiencing in the rest of your life.
Well said, Amber. Last year, so Nate, you've known me for quite some time. I'm a trainer, right? I'm a person that trains a lot. I do that other than when I'm injured. Last year I had 271 days of training last year, training or racing out of the 365. So if you think about that, that's like darn near 6 days per week average. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm not following a plan. I'm using Train Now because even following a low volume plan was too much for me with all the different life stress that I have right now. That's okay. And I'm sharing this because I want to normalize this, that like, while we may see pros that seem like they're just consistent and metronomic all throughout the year, that's not our life. That's not our job to do that. As a result, we have other responsibilities and there are times when we will not be able to train. Brandon, our COO, is another great example of this. He's an incredible athlete and at times trains with a huge amount of volume, meaning days per week. He'll do 6 days per week and he'll follow a plan religiously and he'll do everything. And there are times when he doesn't follow a plan at all and he's not able to get in workouts. It's okay to go through those timeframes. Like I do think there's like an unhealthy, unspoken kind of thing that exists within cycling that just like all of us need to be training all the time. And if we're dropping down in volume, that's something that we should be ashamed of. And I think that should be changed. We should normalize the fact that our life ebbs and flows. There are things out of our control that we absolutely need to pay attention to and take care of. And as a result, training isn't something that pays our bills. Unlike Hannah, where, you know, it pays Hannah's bills. She has to do that. But for us, it's okay to have training change and fluctuate and be the moving block in our whole puzzle. Nate, you were going to say something.
Yeah. If you want to compare yourself to the pros and what John just said of days training, how many days did you work last year? Right? Including weekends and emails late and stuff, and how many hours? Add that up. It's going to be more than a pro cyclist if they're actually training. And they do have other things they have to do with like social media and all that sort of stuff. It's not easy, but like relative, you're probably doing just as your life is totally full, just like their life is totally full. And there is going to be a spot where you cannot do a pro's life and your life. Yeah, I mean, with that, there are a couple pros that kind of do that, but it's still very, very hard. There's not many pros who can balance all of that.
It's tough.
Full-time job and full-time training.
Yep. Yeah, really hard. So Dan, it's okay. First of all, is the main thing that I would say. It's okay when training isn't perfect by whatever standard we or somebody else has deemed perfect. It's just what we can do. Some weeks, if you look back and you got on the bike and you did 30 minutes, win. That's just as much of a win as doing 6 days a week when your life allowed that. Right. So it's just about doing what you can. And yeah, that does mean that, maybe the balance that you get from training, like Amber mentioned, maybe you don't get those benefits for a little bit, but that's just how life goes, as we all know. We just try to do the best we can with what we got. So great question. Hopefully it was applicable. There are lots of takeaways for everybody. I'm going to go into this next one. I'm going to talk a lot during this next one because I went full nerd on this one and I have data and information. But Liam says, can you quantify the difference between a race bike and an endurance bike? All things being equal in terms of spec. Let's say the S-Works SL7, the Tarmac SL7 is what he's talking about, and the Roubaix. And I'm glad that he used those bikes, for example, because, and people are going to say, I swear you guys are sponsored by Specialized. We're not. It's just they share data on their bikes, and not a lot of brands share this bike is this much faster over 40K and that sort of stuff. So thank you for doing that, Liam, because it made this whole thing a whole lot easier. He says, but let this apply to whatever brands you're thinking of in general. So if it's Cannondale and you're looking at a Super 6 or a Synapse, or if it's Pivot and you're going to be looking at like their gravel bike, the Vaults, or you're going to be looking at a road bike, like a matching one that you would get. Keep that in mind. So Liam says, for someone that doesn't race and mentions that they race XC, but wants to be able to keep up on fast group rides, what would I be giving up in performance if I wanted the added comfort? Last week on my race bike, I did a 100 kilometer, 62.1 mile ride, averaging 29.4 kilometers per hour or 18.3 miles an hour, with 873 meters or 2,864 feet of climbing and a weighted average power of 219 watts. Glad we didn't have to convert that one. Says, with the same power on an endurance bike, can you estimate how much slower I would have been or how much more power I'd need to maintain this speed? I hear that endurance bikes aren't fast, but I'd love to be able to quantify this. Keep up the good work. Big fan of TrainerRoad, the podcast, and everything you guys and girls do. Thanks, Liam. All right, we're going to get nerdy. Nate stepped out. He'll be back soon, but I'm sure that he'll really appreciate this section too. So I'm going to do the exact example of the SL7 Roubaix versus the SL7 Tarmac versus the Roubaix. They're S-Works. They both have SRAM red axis. Okay. So that's like their top spec. So between the two of those bikes, the Roubaix weighs 17.
Before you go, you also have to assume the same position, because endurance bikes usually put you up, but in this case, you're assuming the exact same position on both bikes, correct?
No, we're going to bring that up. Well, yes, but that's a caveat that we include in this. Absolutely. That's important to keep in mind.
You're so smart, Sean.
Yes. Roubaix. Thank you, Nate.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Roubaix, Roubaix weighs 17.6 pounds or 8 kilograms. And the Tarmac weighs 15.4 pounds or 7 kilograms. So 1 kilogram difference between the two. So that's the difference in weight. That's important to keep in mind. According to Best Bike Split, if you were to ride both bikes, same circumstances at 250 watts up Alpe d'Huez, the Tarmac would be 42 seconds faster. So that's actually pretty significant. Now that's an hour and 7-minute effort, I think, overall. So 42 seconds, I know it's a small portion of it, but that's not insignificant. So now if you had your course that you were talking about, Liam, so we're talking about a typical rolling like road race course. And this one is 100 kilometers and 873 meters of climbing. On that course, the tarmac would be 22 seconds faster, so less. So that's an interesting point. So climbing matters, but really that weight that it has is less impactful in many cases than we're thinking. We always overestimate the impact of weight. Now, aerodynamics wise, if you're to compare the Roubaix to the SL7, so we're talking endurance bike over to the race bike, the Roubaix is going to be 45 seconds slower over 40 kilometers. So on your course, it would be about 1 minute and 52 seconds slower in terms of aerodynamic drag that you would have by picking the Roubaix. It's really important to note though, and actually, and compared to for like a point of reference, if you're comparing this to the Tarmac SL6, actually, I'll just skip that point and I'll go into the caveat. The Roubaix is an aero optimized endurance bike. So Specialized says, I don't know what that actually means, but that's what they say. So this is, maybe your mileage will vary, meaning that maybe another brand's bike or another model bike isn't as aero as this. But point is, you'll lose 1 minute and 52 seconds over your course if you look at how much time you lose there versus only losing 22 seconds for the weight. So aero matters more than weight in this case. That's important to keep in mind. Okay, but the big caveat, like Nate said, most endurance bikes are going to put you in a much more upright position. This is because they typically have a taller head tube. They typically also have bars that might even have like a rise to them. They will have a more relaxed geometry, meaning that the back will be a bit lower than the front. All those things end up posturing you up, increasing your frontal area and increasing drag. So if you could theoretically get the same exact position on both bikes, then it would be a wash in that regard. But in most cases, it's going to be tougher to do that on an endurance bike. You might have to use like negative rise stems and then deal with a bunch of weird trigonometry to get to where you need to be. So weight and aero combined for your specific scenario. The potential time saved if you went with a Tarmac SL7 on your course, if you combine weight and aerodynamic drag, would be 2 minutes and 14 seconds. So that's not insignificant. That's there. But here's the biggest thing that we all forget. If you're talking about sticking with group rides, you're in the draft most of the time. And when you're in the draft with everybody else, that aerodynamic drag isn't going to matter as much. Now, if you're on the front and you're doing it, then it's going to matter a whole lot more, right? But in those scenarios, it's probably not going to be as big of a deal. But the efficiency part is where a lot of endurance bikes claim to be faster. And that part is really tough to quantify. If you're riding on smooth roads all the time, then who cares if your bike has compliance built into it and suspension, right? But if you're riding on bumpy roads or imperfect surfaces, lots of cracks, that sort of stuff, yeah, those bikes can preserve momentum better than a race bike. And as a result, that might cancel out a good portion of the time that you would save with just the drag and weight. But really, I think it just comes down to the comfort and confidence. Endurance bikes should be more comfortable due to the shock absorption position that they may allow. But if comfort really isn't a limiter for you, then this probably isn't a concern. For me, I don't care about that. I'm not, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, I will, but right now I don't, right? Confidence is another big thing. If you're riding on bumpy roads and you deal with losses of traction, then you're going to want a bike that smooths out that road. And that's where an endurance bike will really shine. But I was just telling Nate, I rode the Athos and the Tarmac back to back. And I was genuinely nervous and unnerved riding the Athos through turns versus riding the Tarmac. And most people might not realize or recognize that, but the bike felt twisty and kind of vague in turns. And I felt like I didn't know what it would do. And I've gotten that same feeling when riding endurance bikes, but most people don't seem to notice that sort of thing. So maybe it doesn't matter. But in the end, 2 minutes and 14 seconds is how much slower the Roubaix would be compared to the Tarmac in this case on your course. If you draft a lot, doesn't matter. What are the host's feelings? Nate, you've mentioned the fact that so you used to ride Avenge all the time. Now, if you got a road bike, I don't know how much racing you do. You've mentioned with concussions that racing isn't exactly the main thing that you want to do. Would you be looking for a more comfort bike or would you be looking for a race bike and why?
Whichever bike can have a dropper post. That's the, I'm serious. Yeah, so it's probably neither of those. I think that's what I would go for because of the stability for descending, especially around here. It just feels more fun to be lower. But if not that, probably I do like the idea of an SL7. There's such good reviews of it, and John says it's confidence inspiring, and that would probably give me confidence inspiring too.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yep. Yeah. Amber, how about you? You don't race anymore, so you don't need to be on your Super 6 and all the super racy bikes, but what would you pick if you could?
I mean, I like the race bikes because I'm comfortable on them. So my comfort level with the race bike might be different than somebody else. And so when we talk about comfort, it can mean multiple different things. It could be comfort with handling. It could be physical comfort in terms of your position on the bike. If you're worried about giving up performance based on a bike choice, I would argue that you would make more gains and give up less and cancel out anything that you leave on the table in terms of performance by focusing on your positioning skills in a group ride. If that's your goal, is to stay with the group on a group ride, positioning is going to get you way more gains than any difference between an endurance versus a performance bike. So I would just suggest get what you want and focus on positioning.
Well said. I like it. How about you, Hannah? I don't even know if you race road, so I don't know where that sits for you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I have to look for this is what I do with my vault, with my gravel bike, and what I've heard talking with other people is I just think the most important thing is to think about where you're going to use your bike the most. So if you're not racing at all and you're just trying to stay with a group ride, once again, get what you want. But I think that the purpose of your bike is probably more of an endurance bike style of riding is what you're outlining here. And I know that for me, I have my vault set up more like a road bike. I put slicks on it. I have road gearing on it, and I have no problem staying in the group rides here. It's different for everyone, but I feel like for training purposes, for group riding purposes, that's great. And I know that at least from a training aspect, the most important thing is going to be comfort, and the slowest thing is going to be pain. So if this is primarily a training tool for you, I would recommend the endurance bike. If you're looking to maybe get into racing or something like that, then we start looking at these really awesome analytics that Jonathan pulled out that I could never do.
Yeah, thanks to Best Bike Split. Really, I didn't do anything there.
You can do it, yeah.
Yeah, you can do it, Hannah. I really have a hard time arguing for most folks in favor of like a race bike. It would just be purely personal preference, unless you're racing and that's your primary goal. Just because otherwise, you're probably going to have a bike that's going to be a bit more comfortable and compliant. The 2 minutes and 14 seconds doesn't matter as much if you're in a group, and in the end, it's about enjoying the ride. So. I just love the feeling of a race bike personally, and that's I think why I'd stick with it. So I bet that changes in like 10 years. Catch me with like a Pringles can for a head tube and everything else. So I made fun of Chad when he made that move, and it's probably just going to be me later on. So, well, thanks for. I don't want to keep us any longer. We've got to cut this one right now. Sorry, everybody, if you wanted a longer one. Next week's actually going to be very short. Nate, I don't know if you have a graduation to go to next week, but I do. Our kids go to the same school, hence the question. So big day, kindergarten graduation next week. So, but everybody that's listening, thank you so much. Go to trainerroad.com/podcast and submit your questions that you have, so then we can answer more of them next week. You do that every week. It's awesome. We appreciate it. Please rate the podcast on Spotify and whatever app you're using. And please go and sign up for TrainerRoad. Give it a shot. See if it works. I promise you it will. And it's going to be awesome. So with all that said, good luck to everybody racing Unbound Gravel, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.